people coming in. I think I'm going to get the introductions started because we have a good meaty meeting today, and I think we're going to have a lot of participation. So I want to welcome all of you back. This is our 9th meeting. This is our California Climate and Energy Collaborative LERN meeting, so Local Energy Resources Network. This is the 9th time we've gotten together. So today we're going to have an active conversation around CARB's recently released draft 2022 scoping plan. That's the primary purpose of today's meeting. As always, I like to encourage everybody to introduce themselves over chat so we get a better idea of who's here with us. And if anybody likes to share their webcam, we encourage you to do it. Just we like to get to know each other a little better here and feel like we're speaking face to face. So go ahead and go to the next slide, John. And just to remind everybody, I'll start with an introduction. I'm Angie Hacker. I'm the SEEK Best Practices Coordinator, and I'm joined today by John and Ryan with the SEEK team, and I'll invite them to say hi over chat. They're here to help with any technical issues anybody is having, as well as just helping us get all this information out, right? It's a bit of a firestorm of information we share in these meetings. So, as always, the purpose of these meetings is really, it's 1 hour that we get with you all to have an interactive discussion. It's a regular space where local governments and those who work with them can help each other learn about possible opportunities and also inform those opportunities, anything that helps them achieve their energy and climate goals. So today's a really good example of that. We are going to have a quick opportunity roundtable. Then we have a featured discussion on the CARB scoping plan with a guest, Jon Costantino, with Tradesman Advisors, and I'll introduce him in just a moment. And a lot of our meeting today will be part of the BPC workshop is actually dedicated to the same topic. We're going to have a conversation about comments. So SEEK is compiling comments on the CARB draft scoping plan, and we want your help. Okay, so hi everybody else joining us. We are just about to roll into our opportunity roundtable before our guest speaker starts. This is our first opportunity for interaction, and like always, we want to ask you to share any opportunities that you're aware of that could help your colleagues. So anything around the state that's related to energy, local energy and climate opportunities. So we might be talking about resources, funding, assistance, input opportunities. Please share that in the chat. It helps us track everything that's happening as well. Well, let me share with you quickly today, because I'm trying to get this through this faster so we can have a meaty conversation. Let me go through some opportunities. You all know everything on the horizon. We've talked about that several times. We're not going to spend too much time today on the policy side, but there are some funding opportunities active right now. Oh my, it's quite active and a busy time for local governments that are really trying to go after some of these big funding opportunities, and they're released now. We've been talking about them for a while, but it's kind of go time. So we've been talking about the Transformative Climate Communities opportunity for a long time. This is eligible for local governments. It's a bit of a more complicated application, but it's also high dollar. And really, if you hadn't submitted your interest survey back in May, then this is probably not on your radar, but I'm really just wishing a good luck to those of you that are applying for this, because the deadline is July 1st. I also want to mention a new opportunity that we came across. It's the Community Services Department, a state opportunity. It's the Low Income Weatherization Program Multifamily Housing Administrator. And so local governments are an eligible entity to become this multifamily housing administrator for this weatherization program. That opportunity, the deadline for that opportunity is July 13th, so pretty quick turnaround. We mentioned before the USDA's Rural Energy Pilot Program. I'm mentioning it again here because there is a deadline coming up, but you would have already had to have submitted a letter of intent already. So another one of these that's a reminder for folks, or just a good luck to folks that are in the process of applying. And that's a USDA program. The other thing the big one that happened since the last time we got together is the OPR opportunity. So the Community Economic Resilience Fund. We've been talking about this for a while. We've had a speaker. We've been sharing the input opportunities, the comment opportunities. This one's a quick turnaround, only an 8-week solicitation period. So it is due on the 25th of July. And it's, it's a $600 million program with ARPA funding, and it's to support economies with an equitable and sustainable recovery from the economic distress of COVID-19. So it's a big there's an economic component to it. I'm hoping that you guys on this call are part of some of these consortiums that are starting, these conversations that are starting to happen around the state, and hopefully already involved in whatever regional application happens in your community, and maybe you're even a lead. The other big one is the Regional Climate Collaborative. That NOFA did come out and actually got a longer time frame here for applications out in October, but the Regional Climate Collaborative, the pre-proposal is due on July 15th. So that's coming up really quickly. And again, this one is to assist under-resourced communities in accessing state funding for climate change mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency projects. So this one's sort of getting your region together to ensure that in the future you have sort of this mechanism that can continuously go out for resources. I imagine a lot of you are working with some regional partners on this. And then the last one I really want to mention that is available is the REAP 2.0. And this is also coming out of the Community Services Department out of the state. And it provides $600 million in state and federal investment to advance implementation of adopted regional plans by funding planning and implementation activities around infill housing and reductions in per capita vehicle miles traveled. So a lot of this funding flows to MPOs. Hopefully, if you are an MPO person, you are already aware of this and perhaps working on it. But I looked at this, and then with the scoping plan in mind, I'm thinking, well, we shouldn't ever say the state never did anything for us. There are opportunities. So we have to get a little more specific about what it is we really might need from here. Okay, just one last note here on one last thing back on that slide, just a reminder to register for the CEC annual forum. It's happening in San Diego, September 21st and 22nd. So you've seen a lot of promotion from us, but it is time to register and book your hotels. Just a reminder on that. The rest of our conversation today is going to be on this input opportunity with CARB. All right, next slide. So we are so fortunate to have a speaker today, and our big goal of today is to really encourage local and regional governments and their partners to spend some time in review of the CARB scoping plan in its draft form, and to provide comment to CARB either directly or in collaboration with us at CEC. We are trying to compile and synthesize comments in case sometimes it's hard for separate organizations to do that. So, just a note here, the implications for our network is pretty substantial, at least in my read, and we think it's worth your time to share your input. So we actually asked if CARB could speak. They can't speak on the scoping plan during an open comment period. And so we were really fortunate that we were able to connect with Jon Costantino. He's the founding principal with Tradesman Advisors. And prior to consulting, Jon was the original climate change planning manager for CARB's Office of Climate Change, and he oversaw the first publication of AB 32's scoping plan in 2008. So Jon was also the lead legislative analyst at CARB, where he made technical and policy recommendations. And he says he still lives and breathes the scoping plan for his clients. And so he's here to provide an overview on the draft scoping plan. I should note he's not necessarily a local government expert, but he's trying to help us point out the things that might be of significance to local governments. Now, I want to, just before I hand it off, I want to be sure to ask you to drop your questions in the chat box as you come up with them while Jon's speaking. And afterwards, we're going to have a Q&A. And after that, we're going to have a facilitated conversation. And if you'd like, you can get a sneak peek at the questions we're going to be asking if you look at the mural and our very preliminary version of the CEC comments, which will be dropped in the chat right now. So with that, thank you so much, Jon, for being here. I'm going to hand it off to you.
Great. Are my slides up? They disappeared.
I'm going to get them up right now. Just give me one moment.
So as you guys probably noticed, that picture was earlier days of pre-COVID, before we all grew beards and hung out in our rooms. So Happy to be here. Happy to talk about the scoping plan. As Angie said, the scoping plan is something I focus on ever since I managed the first one in 2008. And my vacations are planned around it. My retirement's planned around the 5-year cycle. So let's dive in and see what's so interesting about what's going on. This is me. My background was given. One thing that wasn't mentioned was I was a local air quality engineer at Yolo Solano when I first started. So I do have some local government experience. And then I worked my way up through ARB and then out in private practice. So next slide. So it's a sort of a 101 of what the scoping plan is. Many of you might know. I saw a few names that I think I recognized. But we'll start with what AB 32 is, real brief. What the scoping plan is, why everybody should really care, and it's probably not why you think it is. So we'll talk about that. And then, as mentioned, we're in the 5-year cycle of a scoping plan update. So want to let you know what's happening, what it means moving forward, and specifically, what does it say about local governments and what are the expectations that the state of California has in terms of climate change, planning and reduction strategies, and how local governments fit into that plan. Next slide. And then we'll go right to the next slide. Yeah, so AB 32 granted CARB, and when I say CARB, I mean ARB or the Air Resources Board. Never say ARB, just for reference. CARB was given very broad authority under AB 32. And AB 32 passed in 2006. ARB has to maintain the inventory for greenhouse gases, but the second sub-bullet there is really the big one. They have to regulate GHGs, greenhouse gases, throughout the economy. There's a couple examples: combustion, refrigeration, methane, fugitives. But if you think about that, what does that mean? That means a whole lot of things: lawnmowers, heavy-duty trucks, motorcycles, marine applications, standby generators, electric generation, right? So that is a whole lot of power to give one entity. That being said, there are limits, right? Specifically for this group, they don't have permitting authority. They don't have land use authority. They don't have approval authority over projects. So there are limits, but as you'll hear, there's a whole lot of authority and responsibility that come to ARB, and ARB has grown significantly since AB 32 passed and is really a regulatory machine at heart. So working with locals and interacting wasn't their number one background and focus. So AB 32 focused on a 2020 target, but it did not have a sunset date, which is really a key factor. It said to reduce emissions from the state, and these are greenhouse gas directly emitted emissions. So when you turn your car on, when your water heater kicks on, if it's a gas water heater, obviously, these are the emissions that ARB is supposed to focus on. And by 2020, so that was 14 years after the law passed, the goal was to get to 1990 levels, which was about a 28% reduction. Then we were on target for that. So then they passed another law, which was SB 32, which focused on a 40% reduction by 2030. So now you have 10 years to do 40% reduction. And obviously we're not to 2030 yet. So that one, the book is still out on that one, but ARB says we're on track. And CARB was given so much authority that the legislature and the governor at the time, who was Schwarzenegger, decided they needed to tell everybody what they were going to do, right? And they had to tell everybody what they were planning before they actually did it. Because, as I said, they're a regulatory machine. And if you just let a regulatory machine loose, you're going to get a bunch of regulations. And so folks wanted to know what is coming, what's expected, what's it going to cost, what are the environmental impacts. And so the scoping plan was formed. And the first one had to be adopted before the end of 2008. And the law wasn't passed till the end of 2006. So that's 2 years to think about the whole economy. And I can tell you it was quite exciting times. CARB is advised by an Environmental Justice Advisory Committee. We'll talk about that in a second. And it requires significant public process. Next slide. So the previous plans are up here. I'll be very quick on this slide. There's the original plan, which had to get to 2020 goal, the 2013 plan, which focused on short-lived climate pollutants, including methane and refrigerants and black carbon. And then the 2017 plan, which was after SB 32 passed. And that was the plan to get to 2030. And the next plan, the one we're working on now, is 5 years later in 2022. And we'll talk about that. So next slide. So I'm not going to go into detail here, but you can see this is something, if you follow this, you've probably seen many times. The power sector, this is the GHG inventory of the state. And the power sector's done all the work. Agricultural, commercial, industrial, really have not, they've sort of flatlined. Transportation, which is the big magnitude piece of the puzzle, went down mainly because of the low carbon fuel standard and a little bit of price of carbon. But as you can see, it rebounded before the COVID trajectory brought it back down. So that's been the main focus for years and years. Next slide. This is not reflective of the current scoping plan, but more of the last scoping plan. And it just shows the magnitude that's at stake, right? The first scoping plan, you threw some renewables at it and you basically met the standard. I'm oversimplifying, but basically that's what happened. Now, every part of the economy is needed to get to where we're going. And you can see it's a significant chunk to get down to the 2030 target. The slope is much, much steeper. And then the 2050 target is a continuation of measures. So next slide. So now we're not talking about reducing carbon to a number. That was AB 32 and SB 32. Now we're talking about carbon neutrality. And so this is a carbon neutrality scoping plan update. It's not a mandate in the statute. It's by executive order. The first executive order was from Governor Brown, and then that was to see if we could get there by 2045. And then Governor Newsom said, well, what if we could do it by 2035? You should really look at that. So it's a carbon neutrality goal, not a reduction goal. The way they've defined carbon neutrality is all your emissions and all your sequestration or sinks have to equal each other, and then you're carbon neutral. The biggest probably point of this is it's a 20-year planning horizon from 2022 to 2045. It's the longest of any of the scoping plans. Whereas AB 32 was about 10 years and SB 32 was another 10 years. This is 20 years, lot different, a lot of things can happen. You can plan differently. Things get retired. So it's a lot different. Next slide. There's a lot of things that go into the scoping plan. And here's a list of them. You've probably seen these before. So I'll skip them for now. but it's a compilation of things. Next slide. Environmental justice and equity is now baked into everything ARB does. This slide just shows the Cal Enviro screen. This should all be familiar to you. So next slide. Here's an example of some of the programs. You probably heard of cap and trade, low carbon fuel standard, regulations at berth, which is the large ships at the ports. Vehicle electrification and building electrification are really the focus of this next round, and decarbonization that goes along with those. So next slide. Keep going. I forgot, there you go. I won't read these, but it basically knits together everything that was out there and puts it in one document. And the big picture takeaway from this is the next slide. I don't want to jump ahead of myself. The scoping plan is just a plan, but regulations and policy and budgeting follow. So the key about the scoping plan is it's not actually binding, but if it's not in the scoping plan and something is opposite of what the scoping plan asks for, it's very difficult for the CEC, Caltrans, OPR, PUC, whoever, to go in a different direction. So it has a lot of weight. It's very important document, and it presents significant challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. But it's not a regulation. It's not binding. It can't make folks do things. But again, policies, budget, and regulations definitely follow out of this document. Next slide. So there are a bunch of chapters. It's 255 pages. A lot of it talks about industry, cap and trade, transportation. But what we're here to just sort of highlight is the last chapter, which is chapter 5, and then there's 2 appendices, D and E. And if you just look up scoping plan, it'll pop right up. So I didn't provide links, but the idea behind the chapter and the appendices are that what can locals do? What are locals expected to do? How can you work together with the state? And how can you achieve reductions that sort of row in the same direction? There's a section on state actions, and this local action section is meant to be complementary. If you read it, it's more of an ask and an encourage rather than a require. And the reason is because this is where, as we talked about, CARB authority stops, right? They can't make you have a zoning law that does X, Y, or Z. And they can't make you require fewer vehicle miles traveled, right? They can only encourage and highlight these things that need to be done. So the 2 main focuses of the scoping plan, which turn into the appendices really, are local climate action and planning. And the section gives some examples, including building decarbonization, electrification, that sort of thing that Oakland and Sacramento and others have done. It highlights the benefits of having an actionable and real climate action plan, and it encourages those to be developed. It also talks about regionalization and knowing your area. And the state of California is pretty big, and your region might be a carbon capture and storage region, someplace where you can sequester carbon. Your region may have a transmission and energy projects in it, renewable projects. You might have high density housing. So they encourage you to think about how your area can actually participate and be unique. And then they also talk about regional efforts. and how folks can not only do it on the city level, but the county and the regional level as well. And one thing that's interesting about that is not every net zero policy is a benefit to the state, right? If one jurisdiction says we want to be net zero and they draw a boundary around their jurisdiction, it may push development or emissions counting somewhere else. And that may not be in the best interest of what the state's trying to do. And then they talk about CEQA both as a mitigation tool and where local mitigation, if that's what's required, can assist in making life better for folks, and but also as a tool to use to get the desired results that the state is looking for. So next slide. So I'm going to go over Appendix D just a little bit here. The first quote is that what is from the scoping plan, that local government actions are crucial for supporting attainment of the state's climate goals. So that's mentioned several times. ARB can't do this on their own. They need the encouragement. They need to encourage local action. They quote 35% of reductions are under your influence or authority. They want to build momentum for more local action. And they want this to complement both what the air pollution control districts, CAPCOA, and the OPR general plan guidance documents are pushing forward. The role of local climate action planning, they list three big topics: transportation electrification, how do you support that? VMT reduction, and building decarbonization. The role of land use plans, its local responsibilities includes zoning and codes. And then on the CEQA discussion, that there's a few pages on CEQA discussion that talk about discretionary approvals and how to walk through and present documents that have a better shot at doing what they're supposed to and being a little more bulletproof. There's a quote in here I thought was interesting, that 2/3 of the projects and 2/3 of projects that had a CEQA claim against them were based on GHG and vehicle miles traveled. And then there's a whole little bit on equity, because equity is built in to the foundation of this document. The Environmental Justice Advisory Committee has a big voice, has made lots of progress in getting that voice heard. And so CARB is really trying to ensure that equity is at the base of this. And that's, if you go to the next slide, that's sort of what they're talking about here. They're looking at as the quote says, a policy framework to advance sustainable and equitable communities. They want to make better places for everyone, right? That's the quote that I pulled. They want to dismantle entrenched social inequalities. So those are big items, right? Those are big expectations. And sustainable community, the idea of a sustainable community is not necessarily solely a GHG reduction policy. And they talk about that the status quo is unsustainable. They want to move away from the driver first model, and VMT reductions. So VMT, vehicle miles traveled, it's how often we're in our car, how far we have to travel, number of trips, number of passengers per car, right? All that stuff that you guys know really well. They've set targets all the way back to when I was there, and we had the first SB 375 target. That wasn't met. Every subsequent VMT target has not been met. And there's a big uncertainty to the next target, which is in the current scoping plan draft of 15%. But they're not giving up. They want and highlight VMT quite a bit in the document. And then to achieve VMT reductions, it's planning and funding is what they sort of highlight. And then the last set of bullets here is their suggested action policy framework. And for each of these sections in Appendix E, if you haven't seen them yet, there's a vision, an objective, and an action section for each of these 1 through 4, where they talk about sustainable transportation, managing your system, new mobility options, which is walking and biking and transit, and improving the alignment with climate equity and land use planning. So the documents, I sort of went through this very high level. The documents have an expectation that the local governments will follow up and be a partner to the state. Now that takes money, that takes resources, that takes time. And certainly there's questions about all of those, but it's not a document that is super detailed. It's not going to tell you exactly what you need to do. It's not going to make you do anything. It's a high level directional document, but it's clear that the expectations are that local governments are along for the ride. Next slide. So the board, the ARB board, was made up of both local electeds and governor's appointees. Will meet on June 23rd, so next Thursday. It's the first of 2 board meetings. There's a current open comment period. It closes on the 24th. And they did that in case the board meeting slops over to the next day. So June 24th, next Friday, comments are due. What CARB will do after they hear from the board and read the comments is go from a draft scoping plan to a proposed scoping plan. That will be presented in the fall, and they have a fall adoption date that is pretty much hardwired at this point, even though folks have tried to push it back. There'll be summer-led meetings around the state in communities, and that's in addition to the Environmental Justice Advisory Committee groups, which are meeting regularly and having their own community meetings. So really that's the next step is next Thursday to see what the board thinks. And I know there's been a lot of interest and a lot of angst about what's in this document, what's not in this document. And so if your groups haven't met with board members, local, I mean, some of them are county supervisors and mayors of cities. So there are opportunities for folks who know what it's like to be in a local government. Next slide. And this is pretty much a wrap up. This is a little off topic, but one of the regulations that's, and I thank Angie for letting me speak on this. One of the regulations that's going to come out of the scoping plan is something called the Advanced Clean Fleets. It applies to all public fleets, regardless of size. And it says that in 2024, half of any new medium and heavy duty vehicle must be all ZEV or near zero, which means has ZEV capabilities. And then 3 years later, 100% must be ZEVs. There's an informal comment period now. We expect the formal proposal in September, first meeting in October, adopted next year. This is a big deal. So my days are basically split between the scoping plan and the Advanced Clean Fleets rule because it impacts so much of what we do, utility, bucket trucks, forklift, towing, emergency response, mutual aid, water, wastewater systems. They're all impacted by this. There's a lot more details and I won't go into them, but if you haven't yet been hearing about this, your fleet guys may have or should have. So I just wanted to highlight that. And that last slide is just a thank you slide, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak and happy to answer some questions.
Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate that. So then what we're going to do next is we'll have a few minutes here for some Q&A. Some folks have already dropped questions in. So that's where, I'm asking you to ask questions of John, anything that you need his help clarifying from the scoping plan. We're going to have a conversation around opinions and really around through the lens of local and regional government perspectives that can be shared. We're going to have that next. But these questions for John are really more, hopefully, like clarification. So I have a question here from Leslie Alden from Drawdown Bay Area, and she says 40% reduction by 2030 is woefully inadequate. What potential do you see, either ambitious or realistic, to get to an 80% reduction by 2030, effectively a doubling of the state goal? So she's just asking whether or not you find that to be a realistic.
Yeah, so ARB has done modeling to show that getting to 2035 carbon neutrality, which was one of the asks of the Governor Newsom, was rather expensive and hard to do. And the biggest impediment to getting to that goal, whether it's the 2035 goal or the 80% by 2030 goal, which was in the question, is the legacy pieces of equipment, right? That's not even an 8-year-old car that you bought today that you would have to swap out, and the trucks and the power plants and the wastewater treatment system. So there's a whole lot of existing infrastructure that gets much more expensive to meet those goals if you get rid of them before their useful life. So that's one of the reasons why ARB is proposing 2045, so that things can sort of wear out and die on their own and then be replaced with cleaner technology.
Thank you, John. That was a good, concise answer. We have a few more questions and we'll have to go pretty quick so we have time for more discussion. Geraldine Mendoza, asks, what is the role of the California Energy Commission in drafting the scoping plan, and how do the two agencies coordinate on climate policy, or do they?
They do. So there's something called the Energy Principles, which is the heads of Cal ISO, CCEC, PUC, and ARB. They meet regularly to talk about energy policy, electrification, demand, loads. So the CEC is an active sister agency in the behind the scenes of this document.
Thank you. There's a question here from Dave Shukla. The scoping plan, can it be rewritten without any reliance on natural gas peaker plants?
I would say that'd be tough. At this point, ARB is highlighted that they're necessary, at least for the time being. It depends on your time scale. I mean, eventually, the grid is going to be, a retail grid will be 100% zero emission. And so that will happen by 2045. That's the SB 100 goal. But this scoping plan anticipates that peakers will be needed at least for the next defined time period.
Thank you very much. All right, so Alex from the city of Watsonville asks, John, you're hinting at system change with VMT, and I think that's primarily missing in all of this. The plan implies keep our economy healthy and not rock the boat and somehow still end up where we need to go. It ignores a disruption that is unavoidable. How much do we need to change the system to get to carbon neutrality? That's a big question.
That's a big question, and I think the answer is the system has to change, right? You can't hop in your gasoline powered car, drive to Starbucks, get a disposable cup and throw it in the landfill and have the methane come off, right? Everything about that statement, CARB wants to change, including how you get in your car, what kind of car it is, how far you drive, the fact that you even leave your house to go to work. So the system is questioned with this plan, I guess is the best way to put it.
Okay, great. We're going to take two more questions and move into our discussion. So Robert Perry with Synergistic Solutions asked, how prominently does vehicle grid integration technology figure into this plan?
It's sort of in the background, right? I think ARB is assuming at some point V2X or vehicle to everything will occur. But the first step is to make things electric, make the grid, decarbonize the grid, then make the transport vehicles electric. And then the next more complicated step is the vehicle to grid integration that will come down the road.
And finally, Omri from Ambag is asking, I'm wondering if you could share insight on why the plan focuses on meeting the 2045 targets and not the 2030 target.
Yeah, so I certainly skipped over many details. ARB did numerous modeling runs. They did a GHG emissions modeling run, air quality, public health, and economic. So there's many more appendices. There's thousands of pages of documents on the website. And they basically determined that 2035 was too expensive, too hard to reach, too many uncertainties, and wasn't feasible because of a variety of things, including the need to retire. I think one number is 18 million light duty passenger vehicles. So unless those 18 million people want to give up a car that still has useful life in it, or the state wants to require them to get rid of their cars, the ARB just felt that there's too many pieces of the puzzle that they couldn't get done to meet 2035. And I should note that, California is trying to be a leader and trying to put together a plan that people can follow, and a very expensive plan that has a high probability of not meeting its goals is not leadership in the state's mind. So I think we're going to hear that in a week from now, but that's just my opinion.
All right, John, thank you so much. I'm going to invite you to hang around with us as we have
I'll
this.
definitely stick around.
Yeah, and if you'd like, there's other questions that have come into the chat, and feel free to address those over chat, but also feel free to just keep your mind focused on the conversation, whatever you're comfortable with. Thank you guys. Those were great questions. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so if you have signed up for today, you probably received a very rough draft of the comments that CCEC is beginning to compile. It was sent, I think, on Friday. So CCEC, we're just aware that LGSCC is our sister program. However, they mainly work on CPUC and they didn't have capacity to file comments here, and that it's really difficult for local and regional governments, in particular, to file comments, especially in such a short time frame. And sometimes at all. And so what we really wanted to do here is make it easier to get comments in, and whether or not you want to remain anonymous is great. So what you're encouraged to do is to take a look at our comments. And I just want to emphasize they are high level, and they are my approach here has been, let me try some talking points here and make some suggestions, and then leave it open to get shot down and edited and improved upon, which I'm very happy. You don't have to spare my feelings. I would love to hear your thoughts. And so you can do that directly in the shared document that's now in the chat. And then we're going to have a discussion today using a mural board to provide input on a few facilitated questions. And then also, if you just want to start dropping whatever comments you have by chapter or appendix, if you've looked at the scoping plan already, we would welcome you to do that. So you've got different ways to do it. If there are other organizations that are doing comments and you would like us to fully, consider amplifying that or taking pieces of it, we're also going to ask you to let us know. And anything that you see that we've written, feel free to use for your own comments. You can also, you don't have to just go through us. You could send comments directly to CARB. You could speak or provide comments at the EJAC workshop and an upcoming CARB workshop. And we've sent information about that around. But just to give you a little more detail on where we're headed with our comments. So we haven't gotten yet so into the weeds on the proposed scenarios, and we're really looking at these comments as coming primarily from a local and regional government voice, which would be different than some of you who are more of an advocacy organization voice, still a slightly different tone. But our main point is really trying to emphasize that we agree that local governments are a critical partner in the state's emission reduction goals, and that they are uniquely capable of potentially even more strategies than this plan gives them credit for. You'll have administering things from air districts and water districts, fire departments, ag commissioners, housing departments, RENA, zoning, permitting, transit systems. It's a lot of authorities that local governments have at their hands, at their fingertips, that could be that can be useful here. And your position and your authorities are unmatched. That's what we're trying to state here. Make you an unmatched ally in implementing and facilitating emission reduction. So it sounds like what really came out to me was that there is a high level or assumption of major involvement of local governments, as Jon said, and that the level of responsibility is sort of unclear, and it's hard to make informed comment about whether the targets are aligned with what you all are doing or whether or not you find them feasible. But more importantly, there's not a lot of acknowledgement here that this work, developing and implementing a local climate action plan, is super resource intensive, and that just assuming or expecting local governments to be able to get it done may not be the best approach. So trying to close that gap is part of what we're trying to do here. So I'm going to ask Jon to go ahead and shift over to the mural board. So the mural board, I hope that has been put in the chat. Oh yeah, there we go, the LERN mural. So I'd like to invite you all to join me over in the LERN mural. Jon, are you working on that? Okay, great. Now, if you haven't used mural, all you really do is double click and you can add a post-it and write a comment here. And you can drag it around. Maybe Jon, I think you're going to try to demo that. So you just double click to add a sticky and add a comment. So we're going to actually start here. Well, there's two things, right? I mentioned you could go down to the bottom, and Jon, maybe you can just scroll down. If you have just a comment you would like to drop now or later on any of the chapters of the scoping plan, we encourage you to do that down below. We're going to spend our time on the top half of this mural board, which is the conversation. I want to generally talk about the unique abilities of local regional governments, because we want to emphasize that. And we want to talk about how can we unlock this local potential in line with the scoping plan. And so I'd be interested in folks starting to share thoughts and ideas on these topics. So the first one there, the unique abilities of local and regional governments, I want to share with you a list that I have compiled, and feel free to continue to just drop your post-its here, but we're asking, does the draft 2022 Scoping Plan and Local Actions Appendix accurately reflect the unique abilities of local and regional governments? And so if you haven't looked at it, it might be difficult for you to say, but Jon, if you would go ahead and just throw up to the screen the spreadsheet. I just want folks to see what's there. So here's what I've done. These categories are my doing, not CARB's, but I'm trying to organize what the measures are in the scoping plan against what local governments do. And so column B is the actual measures from the scoping plan, the emission reduction measures. And then there are sub measures, which are basically getting more specific about how to implement those measures. So say for deploying ZEVs and reducing driving demand, they want to see reduction in BMT per capita. Then I have crosswalked that over to what's in the Local Actions Appendix, Scoping Plan Appendix D, and dropped what CARB is telling us in that appendix. They feel that the most important, the highest priority local actions are to align with those measures. So I've aligned them, but I'm trying to show what is it that what are all the measures in the CARB scoping plan, and which of those do they feel local governments can really help with and how? And then on the right, I want to tell them what we think. What are some examples of actions that local governments are capable of implementing and facilitating along all of these measures? And that's where I could use some help. And so this does some work for you in terms of like a quick review of what the measures are, what the state feels are the priority local actions, and then what we feel the priority local actions are. All right, so I just want to make sure you knew that was there. I think it's interesting. This is going to help us in general in the SEEK team, just kind of really get our head around what are all the things local governments are doing that are emission reductions, which is something we've been kind of working on anyways. All right, let's go back to the mural, and I'm just curious what folks are starting to say here. All right, so on this, whether it accurately reflects the unique abilities of local and regional governments, somebody says it's missing detail on procurement. Yeah, I think I sort of noticed that as well. That is an opportunity for local government. And then another one here, can you scroll in a little? Yeah, actually I can scroll in. VMT reductions through employee base, right? Remote work, parking options, yep. Okay, so basically for public employees. Okay, the other question down here is, what do you feel are the highest priority actions local governments can implement or facilitate to reduce emissions? Please add actions and examples. So yeah, the scoping plan, this one on all electric code requirements for new construction, that they are very aware that that's a big one for local government. That's what they're sort of highlighting anecdotally. In my read, they really seem like they want us to do a lot on transportation and electrification and vehicle miles traveled. That might be where the bulk of reductions, in their opinion, can really come from. And then obviously the decarbonization, including code. So let's see, promote and enable shared mobility. Yep. Yeah, I'd like examples. And I guess, if you are, these are great, and a mural is a great place to put these. And then if you are really able to get into the scoping plan comments and give us, as specific of examples as you can about what kinds of programs and actions we can highlight that local governments are already successfully working on, then that would be really helpful here. This is, it's kind of a love letter. So cities to lead the charge on vehicle electrification by changing over their fleets. Yeah, yep. Integrating distributed energy development as part of local planning processes. Yep, join the local CCA, develop incentive programs for multifamily buildings. Thank you, everybody. This is awesome. All right, so if everybody feels really passionate that they want to say something out loud here, I would encourage you to raise your hand and we can call on you. So this next one, unlocking local potential. The scoping plan places high expectations on local government. However, local governments and their partners face challenges when developing and implementing their climate action plans. So what should the state do to help local and regional governments achieve their emission reduction goals? So we drafted some recommendations, but we really would like to get more specific here. And we'd like to hear your ideas. Knowing that there's a lot of work here to do and the local governments are key to the emission reductions we're trying to achieve, how can the state help? And, just to note here, we work with CARB a lot. The folks that we get to work with, they want to help. So it's tricky. How can they help all local governments across California with what they, they also have a limitation in resources, but let's see. So obviously we're suggesting here is supporting local climate action with the new state program and dedicated staff. One thing I'm suggesting here is just sort of noting that there's the new OPR climate adaptation funding grant. And just wondering out loud, is that something that could be replicated on the mitigation side? Something similar for both planning and implementation. And then we're asking, you guys probably know Civic well, says to conduct GHG inventories for all cities. That's one of the positions we've taken. That we're asking CARB to go ahead and do that. And then just to work closely with SEEK and its network on a few areas, just closer coordination and more resources is generally what we're asking for to really unlock the potential of local and regional governments. So I would encourage you all to peruse around all of these suggestions. We are going to use them, and I really appreciate this. One thing I wanted to do here while y'all are working on that too is I have one poll. So John, if you wouldn't mind launching the poll when you are ready. And y'all, you don't have to stop adding comments in the mural or in this draft scoping plan comments when we're done here at the top of the hour. You can continue along. Like I said, you can send comments directly to me as well. Or if you want to have a conversation, that's fine too. So John, are you able to share that? Or maybe it's Ryan to share the poll.
Angie, I'm trying. John, are you trying?
Yeah, so sorry, I set it up, but it looks like it is not active at the moment. So sorry about that. Let me see if I can get it going.
Okay. And I guess if anybody in this last minute or so, are we on the right track? What else are we missing? And if you feel like we're really missing something major, I would encourage you to drop comments. You can drop it in the draft. You can drop it here in the mural in the second area, just wherever it applies, or just wherever you feel like, really. We want to make sure we're not missing some key point that really, from the perspective of local regional governments should be made. Well, that's okay if that doesn't work out, John. What I was trying to do there was to ask, I think that what CARB's doing a lot of right now is trying to provide local governments with guidance. That's part of what the point of Local Actions Appendix D is a guidance to local governments to say you don't necessarily have to do an inventory yourself or a climate action plan. You could just implement or facilitate these things that we think are the highest bang for the buck. And so guidance is useful, but I guess the question for you all was going to be whether or not, how critical is creating local climate action plans in order to actually initiate the emission reduction strategies. So we might save that for another time. Technical difficulties. All right, so I see a lot of really good input happening here. Why don't we go ahead and go back to the last slide. Oh, here you go. Thank you. You got the poll going. All right. So which of the following? Oh, that's not it. That's not it. But okay, you can go ahead and end the poll. All right. So like I said, we would love your input. We're going to send up a follow-up just to remind you of the different ways that you have to provide input, and then you can always just contact me. Next slide, please. So our next meeting is going to be July 12th, and in the meantime, we have 2 meetings that are going to happen. One is going to be July 1st. It's very related. It's on the conversation we had last month, the Seek Resource Organization Brainstorm, which was really just how do we get our heads around the whole universe of what local governments are doing and then organize any resources we have access to around that. If you want to be part of that conversation, I think it's a good one for any deep thinkers. We would love to have you. There's going to be a promotional email about it. Local actions listening session. So CARB actually wants to hear more thoughts on the local actions appendix after the comment period here is over. So look for that in July, and it'll be a more intimate input session, but we're excited for that as well. Okay, well, with that, I just want to stop and say thank you so much for, you don't have to, yeah, that one's okay. We'll just stop there and say thank you so much for everybody's time. Thanks again to our speaker, John, and feel free to just continue on here in the mural if you have time, and let me know how else we can help you in compiling these comments. And with that, we hope you have a really fantastic rest of your day. Thanks so much.